because I didn't want to get up and go around the camera. You may go, thank you darling, just hope you don't get too wet on the way out. It's so rainy today. This is not the day really to go out and about and do anything fun, so best kind of day to sew. Before I get too carried away, let's get on with it, because I don't know how much time we've got before my camera decides to run out of charge, because I've got the microphone running as well. So what I do, first of all, just show you, before I've started doing any of this, I've changed my needles. So I put these Microtex needles in size 90, and I've tested them on the offcuts of my canvas. I'm actually going to use a much bigger stitch length than I normally do, because this canvas, you don't want to perforate it with too small stitches, although obviously going around the corners you're going to have to be a bit more careful. Anyway, let's crack on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the elastic loops. So you can see on the version I've got here, which is the one from the pattern, that's the elastic loops. And I have already prepped everything. So I have taken the opportunity to put all of my marks transferred and do the washi tape on here. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to need the glue, because we're going to be a little bit cheeky here, and I'm just going to hold everything with my fingers and stitch it into place. So the first thing we do with this is we stitch the elastic on at both ends. So I've got marks on the washi tape, and I've got the marks on the piece itself. So let's just see if I've got the needle in the right place. Ooh, a little bit further over. I'm going to turn it up to 3, and I'm going to start with a lock stitch. If your machine doesn't have a lock stitch, what you might find is you need to use a much smaller stitch length to start with. So I'm going to raise my needle. So I've got the little triangle bit on my open-toed foot here, shows me where the needle is going to fall. So I've lined that up with the markings that I've put on the pocket piece itself, the front pocket. So now I'm going to reverse all the way back up. I'm going to do the same again. And start the needles going down so I can see what's going to fall. There's my first bit. So I'm going to fold up the other end, and again you can glue it, but I am just confidently going to position it. And actually the washi tape that I've actually tucked around the end is really helpful for keeping it all in place. Obviously the one thing I didn't think of when I decided to do this with waterproof canvas is you can't really pin anything because it leaves holes. So I'm going to have to just hold everything very tightly into position. So here we go, back up again. It's really difficult sometimes to judge exactly where you want to stop. But I've decided this time I'm not going to go too far outside of the elastic again, because I don't want to perforate my waterproof canvas. I have used it before, but I'm not one of you lovely bag makers who's really used to using vinyl and other fabrics. But, So now that I've got these in place, we've got a big loop here, and I'm just going to reach out and turn my laptop on. So all we're going to do now is line up the markings on the washi tapes so that they are even. So you can see we've created like a little tuck of elastic there. This bit's always so slow when my machine does this. I don't know why I've chosen to do 2 rows of elastic here. I think it just looked nice. And if you feel the fabric's dragging and it's going to try and put the stitch in the wrong place, you can actually just sort of tug it with your hands as you're going. So let's do the lock stitch again. Do the same again. There's a lot of repetition in this pattern, which is great because it means just as you finish one, you're going to have to do the same again on the next one, which means you're not learning new skills all the time. It's not complicated. So this is one of those patterns you can actually just relax while you're doing. You don't have to think about it. So if you're having to make multiples like I am, because I have various family members who have asked for them, then it's great because you sort of just know what you're doing. Normally I wouldn't do this with such a dark thread, but what I didn't want to do is make you all wait while I rethread my machine each time. So I've done everything in the same colour. So one more. So I don't know if you can see there, I'm just going to hold it up, but basically you've got the 3 lines of elastic. I'm holding the excess of the elastic to each side with my fingers, and then that keeps the rows of stitching really neat. Okay. Having said that about the neat, only the last one is super neat. My dad won't mind, bless him. Okay. So I'm going to pull off the washi tape. This one that I'm using here, unlike the one I used in the last video, does actually come off really easily. So, okay. And then you can use your awl or stiletto, or whatever you want to call it, to pull off the smaller pieces. I think if any of you have used a cricut, whatever you want to call it, and have done work with vinyl, you'll know exactly what this is because you have to do it quite a lot. Managed to pull it through without leaving any bits in. That was quite successful. Don't ask me what I did differently. halfway there. The only downside to this is you end up with tiny bits of washi tape, but at least it's paper, so if it does escape into the environment, it's not going to last forever. Now, I am someone who likes to do all of my thread ends as I go along. It's up to you whether you do it at the end when you're neating everything up, or whether you do it now. So, there we go. So that is the elastic. Now I forgot to say, just in case anybody's wondering, because in the original I used a fusible fleece and it was smaller than the main piece, I've this time used a little bit of spray glue, and I've used, it's actually curtain interlining, but it's just some batting that I had. So what I'm going to do is stitch everything to this, and at the end, when I've actually stitched the pieces together, I'm then going to cut this out of the seam allowance. So anyway, we have finished the first step. So the second step is the front pockets, or pocket on the front pocket. So this one here. Yeah, it is called the front pocket. So there we go. What I took the liberty of doing earlier, and I always do this because I'm really fussy about things like this, is I have drawn the stitching lines on because I want to make sure that I get to the corners correctly. So normally I would use a 1/4 inch foot, but because I've drawn the stitching lines on, I don't need to. So this is a slightly softer vinyl, and I'm actually going to turn it down to 2.6, which means I'm going to do it at 2.4 to go around the corners and hope that everything works. So I'm going to leave a turning gap in the side. Now, when I did the main pattern, I left some very small turning gaps, which meant it just took that little bit longer to oh, I forgot to turn the seam down there. Let's do it this time. Turn it down to 2.2. Normally I'd turn it down to about 2 because I am so heavy-handed with the turning tool. Do it again. Forgotten to turn my stitch length down, so I'll do it just on the other side. I've slowed down to go around the curves, and it does help if you've actually got them drawn on, because it means you're going to get them even on both sides. Because I don't know about you, but I always find when I stitch down into a seam, I seem to get a completely different curve when I stitch up the other way. So I just used a straight ruler to do this. I have got some fancy rulers for doing curves and things, but they are all in centimetres. Because when I'm not sewing this sort of thing, I do everything in centimetres. See there, stitched quite nicely. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip the corners, and then I'm going to use the pinking shears. So I haven't gone too close into the corners on this because, oh, let's go a little bit closer. There we go. It's like playing a game of chicken when you cut corners, because you want to get a nice finish, but you don't necessarily want to poke the ends through like I often do. So you don't have to use pinking shears, you can actually just trim the seam with your ordinary scissors and then just cut little notches into it, little triangle shaped notches, and then it just helps it around the curves. Again, this fabric is not as stretchy and as an ordinary fabric because it has a coating on it. So I don't know if we even need to do this, but you know, we'll do it. Right. I have my little thread catcher over here, and I also have this, oops, which I'm using as to press my seams open instead of ironing. So it isn't a seam roller, but I'm using it as a seam roller. It's actually a Jade face roller, which I think I got from Tiger or somewhere like that. Oops. Pressing too hard is not a good idea. Let's put that back. This is the comedy bit where I drop everything on the floor. Right. Oh, that has actually done quite a nice sharp point there, which is good. I don't know if you can hear the rain outside. My road is on the top of a hill, and my goodness, do we get the wind up here? It is mad. Right, here we go. So if you can't press a seam, I could use the seam rolling thing, or I can just use my fingers. Now I think I've had this before with this waterproof canvas. It's almost like it catches air inside of it, so you have to keep pressing it out. But anyway, what I'm going to do first then is I'm going to top stitch the top, or edge, almost more like an edge stitch. So I'm going to turn my stitching up to 3 for this, but I'm going to work on 3.5 for the main body of the piece. And then you're just going to follow around using your foot. The edge of your foot is your guide. Just keep checking that it hasn't tried to escape back in. No. And just in case you're wondering why I'm not lifting the foot, I have a knee lift. I love my knee lift, so it keeps my hands out of the way as much as I can. There we go. So that is our piece. What we need to do now is I've already transferred the marks, as I said before. Now, we're not going to be able to pin this. So what I'm going to have to do is actually do it by feel. So I'm going to pop that there. And this time I want to edge stitch it, so I want to stitch it quite close. So I'm just going to line it up. But this time I am going to do a reverse stitch, and It's making sure it sits just inside the lines we drew. Again, slow down when you get to the corner. And this is the point where you can start to swing it round and make sure everything is sitting on the line, which it is. So there's like a little line on my foot, which is just the bit that's on there to put the thread through so that it's in the right place, and that's what I use to as my guide if I'm edge stitching really close. And I can see, you can't see unfortunately, but I can see that it is sitting nicely on the chalk line. So I'm going to take it as far as I can, and then I'm going to move it around and start to swing it as I go, making sure the top ends up in the same place. So you can see there's a lot of fullness here that I'm just pushing out of the way with my finger. And again, we're going to go slowly around this corner. Lift the foot if you need to get the curve right. Nearly there. And this is going to seal up our edge that we've just left our turning gap. And there we have it. One front pocket, you can see it all seems to fit nicely, and that, for my dad, is where his string is going to go. So let's pop that to one side. We are now going to work on the back. So I've got it here. You can't really see the markings because I transferred them using the blue dressmaker's carbon paper, but they are there. Luckily I can see them. So what we're going to make first is the scissor holster, which we're doing in exactly the same way as we did that pocket. Put the piece to one side. Now, what I haven't done this time, I haven't actually drawn the seam allowance everywhere. So I'm going to take off my top stitching foot, my open-toed foot, and I'm going to put my 1/4 inch foot on. Make sure that the thread is in the right place. So yet again, I'm going to leave a gap in the side. It doesn't matter which side. Also going to turn my stitching back down. Leave a slightly bigger gap. Let's see if I can remember this time to turn my stitching length round down as I get to the corners. Yes. Now, if this was square, of course, you've got markings on your 1/4 inch foot which shows you where the edge is, but because this isn't square, because this has got angles, that's why I've drawn them on first. Now this time I've slightly overshot, which is not a problem because I'll just literally go back down again. So you can manipulate the fabric a bit with your fingers, and I am actually still in the smaller stitch length there. So let's take it back up to where we were. I mean, the other thing about having a shorter stitch length is it means you've got a little bit more precision as to where your needle lands on the corners. back down again. One more stitch. And actually there's not very far to go, so I'm not going to bother to turn it back up again. So. Now, I'm using my laptop to see if there are any questions, and it means my laptop keeps switching itself off. I suppose I should have thought about that first. So what I normally do with this, then I cut it across a couple of threads above the corner. Then I cut a little bit more off like this. And then if I'm feeling really brave, I sometimes go back in and cut a bit more off again. Whoops. If it's on the diagonal, you can often get away with things. It's only if you poke it too hard at the other end that you start to get into trouble. There we go. And on this one, there's absolutely no need for the pinking shears. Okay. So let's do the thing with the roller again. So I always find it's easier if you do this first before you turn it. Then even if you have to fiddle with it once you've turned it, you've at least got something to work on. Let's do the other side. I mean, this roller is quite good. I'm sure it's probably not as good as the real thing, but it does the job. And I just spotted it and thought, ooh, that'll make a good seam roller. And this is where I look to see where I put my turning tool. Ah. I have got a spare. A lot of people use chopsticks. I have got chopsticks, but I've never used them for this. So that might be the option, is I have multiple chopsticks, then I can't lose them. It's underneath there. No, I genuinely don't know where it's gone. Probably put something on top of it, to be quite honest. Now this one's much harder to get sharp. There is a really amazing tutorial that I've used, which is on Closet Core's website, and I think I link to it in the main pattern video, where they use a piece of thread to go around the needle on the inside, so it's, when you pull it through you actually end up with this bit that you can literally pull out the corner, and it's, I've done it before on collar points, it's absolutely great. But I decided when I was doing this that I didn't mind, because it's actually going to be hidden under lots of stitching anyway. Switch to my other foot. It's just a case of keeping an eye on this. Also, checking that it starts correctly, which I had the funny feeling it wasn't going to. Apart from anything else, I hadn't turned my stitch length up, so that was probably a good thing. No. So I'm going to get my hump jumper. Doesn't doesn't really need lifting a lot, but it just needs lifting enough to get over that corner. That's it. Okay, so definitely need to give that a bit of a roll with my fingers, and that just slightly frayed there. So I was worried if there was a point that, you know, if I was going to leave this for a while, I would probably use some glue or something on it, but as it is, I'm just going to use a clip to hold it shut. And then we will take our piece. So I can just about see the lines on here. So it doesn't really matter. Oh, do you know what? I've just realised I've forgotten to top stitch the bottom edge as well. So let's go back to the hump jumper again. I mean, nobody would see because it's tucked down inside the pocket, but it does actually help it have a bit more stability. That's more like it. So we're now done at the top and at the bottom. So now it's a case of looking for those lines and lining everything up. Now, when I transferred the lines on this one, because they were quite faint, I then used some chalk to transfer the top so I could actually make sure that everything lines up nicely. That's it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get it started. And then I'm going to have a fiddle and roll out the seams as I go along. I've just done a bit of back stitching just to above where it all starts, because obviously you're going to be putting your scissors or your secateurs in and out. You don't want that to pull too much and pull away. Here we go. We've got it. And same at the bottom. There we go. So first side is on. So I think there's about 3/8 of an inch difference between the size of the holster itself and where the stitching line is. It's very dark. I can't see it. Ah, now I can. Right. So you really need to go in the same direction with the stitching, which means that you're tucking it and turning it round. So you're working the opposite way. Now I am going to use the hump jumper this way because I feel like more of the foot is sticking off the end. So now I've got that end in. I just need to find where the mark was. Oh, yes, I can see it. It's because I'm not in the light. I'm sitting in my own shadow. Yep, still in the right place. And there we go. So just to show you, it will fit in nicely, and my dad's secateurs definitely also fit. Let's just grab that little thread there. Okay, put that to one side again, and we have got the pocket. Now this pocket has got pleats in the bottom, so instead of having the stitched edge at the bottom, I've got the stitched edge at the top. So we're going to fold this in half. We still need to leave ourselves a turning gap. So what I'm going to do is switch my foot out again. So I'm using the 1/4 inch foot. If you don't have one of these, I would definitely recommend it. I mean, I've got the proper Janome one because I thought I would treat myself to a new foot since I had a new machine this year, but the previous ones I've had were just from Amazon, I think, possibly one from AliExpress, and they're absolutely fine. They're not expensive and they just make such a difference to sewing. Now I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this, but on these 1/4 inch feet there's always a line that shows you when your needle is 1/4 inches away from the edge, so you know when to stop and swing. Let's just see if that's not quite close enough. Now if you find with your stitch length you can see you're going to overshoot, what you can do is just move the fabric back, and then when you drop the needle again, you should be in the correct place. So I've done that. I'm actually going to switch it over so I can stitch down to the bottom. So we're working from the other side now. Okay, you can see this is a really quick pattern. Let's cut the corners again. Obviously also remember to cut the folded bottom edge. I can see my proper point turner. I just put it underneath the camera. So here we go. I did leave a very small turning gap again now. I'm always tempted to leave a small turning gap. I've obviously also forgotten to pull back these seams, but this is square and there's no diagonals, so no bias cut edges that might stretch, so we'll just go for it. And this fabric's actually really great because it's quite thin, but it seems pretty stable, so it means the seams are quite, they don't have too much bulk in them, which is good. So roll those seams again. I'll just see if it makes a difference actually rolling them and using the seam roller. I had the funny feeling this fabric is just doesn't really want to take a crease, which is why we're stitching it instead. So that's the side, that's the other side. Let's change foot and top stitch the top edge. I'm going for the if in doubt use the hump jumper now as well, because there's nothing worse than having a lot of bunched up stitches visible. Well, there is things worse. There are running out of thread just before the end of the seam. That's really annoying. But in sewing, one of the worst things is lots of bunched up stitches and nested seams. So turn up my seam. I'll reach over in a minute and see if I can find the hand joker. I actually have two, just because they do have a tendency to fly off, do their own thing. Here we go. There it is, halfway across the table. Let's take our piece again. And again, I'm going to sew from the top to the bottom on both sides. If you're working with fabric, you would be able to pin this into place. But since I'm not, we are just going for it. One side done. Again, I'm going to have to sew from top to the bottom again to make sure that it stays at the same height as it should. still looking for those lines because they're so faint. I think I will invest in some point in some of the white coloured chalk. Okay, so now what we need to do, I'll get my chalk pencil ready because we need to make a couple of marks. We need to find the halfway point of the pocket. So I'm going to just make a mark on it with the chalk. And now, have I got my... Oh, excuse me, having to lean across you there, but just need my ruler, and I'm going to work out so that's 3.5, which is going to be 1 3/4. Also going to draw a chalk line just along, only because I'm working in dark colours and I can't really see what I'm doing. So first of all we need to match the two centre marks, and then we need to fold the edge so that it meets on both sides. Again, you can hold it with your fingers, or you can pin it if you're using a fabric that you can pin. You might need to stop halfway and just check that that fold is still falling in the same place, because sometimes if your fabric's really stretchy, it can stretch itself out, and then this pleat would actually be too long. But, so this fabric's really stable, so I haven't had any problems. There we go. Take that little thread. There's always a couple of little ends I find, even with the kind of sewing machine I have, but I always keep my scissors next to my machine. Here we go. So that then is going to be the pocket for your phone or seed packets or whatever you think you're going to use it for. So we've now done all of the storage bits. Next thing we're going to do is the straps. They're both done exactly the same. And again, we can't press these, so I'm going to have to use my seam rollery thing. Let's use the bigger end and see if that is more effective. Oh yeah, that's quite effective. It's definitely giving me a crease. I'm going to fold it into 4 basically, so I've creased it in the middle. And I think I'm going to use clips to really hold this in place, because it's going to try and bounce out and escape. Okay, So we're just going to edge stitch it. No, we're not. I've forgotten something. Ha ha ha. Let's cut that. If we edge stitch it, we obviously would end up with a raw edge at the bottom. So this is going to be the bit where we find out if the glue works with this fabric. So I'm actually going to move my clip further up. We're going to fold it up by 1/4 of an inch. And I am actually going to try and see if this fabric glue will hold it. Now, I'm eyeballing this, but you can always measure. No, the glue doesn't hold it. I suspected as much. So we'll just have to carefully use our fingers and hope we can make it look nice at the end if it started to try and escape. Alternatively, you could just use loads and loads of clips. It's not quite right, so we might have to go for loads and loads of clips and take them off at the end. It's not too bad. So just try and poke the corners right inside. You want them to be near the edge because you want the thickness to be the same, but you don't want any little threads poking out. So because I'm going round the bottom and back up again, I'm actually going to start stitching from the folded side, because actually if the layers shift against each other, which is very likely, then I can adjust them again when we get to the bottom. And I think I'm going to use the hump jumper again because it feels a little bit like it might ruin the stitching line. Now, if you've got a design that you particularly want to have A, the right way up, or B, you've got some really special part of the design you want to use, I would suggest making sure you're stitching with that at the top, because that way you can remember to use that part later. Let's get my other hump jumper. No, my second hump jumper's walked away. There it is. I bet you could see that the whole time. Okay. Let's just see if that looks nice and flat. I think it's okay actually. I was just thinking to myself I could do a second row of stitching if I wasn't happy with it, but I think actually that's going to be okay. So I just need to repeat it with the other one and make sure it is the same length exactly. Yeah, in fact either side is actually all right, but I'm hoping that we have sort of some of this orange print on the outer, so they sort of match. What's that? Now what I don't know is how long my camera is going to last for. Because it's running the microphone as well, it might actually just suddenly cut off. If it does, I apologise. We are very nearly there though. Let's see. So it's that part I want to have out. I spent ages looking at this fabric trying to decide which was the right way up, and I really couldn't tell. In fact, to my mind it looked like the sideways on would have been the right way, but yeah, that's the same length. So let's get clips so I'm not trying to hold everything. See, that was easier using all the different clips. So now we just need to tuck those ends inside. Oh, of course I can tell that the camera's still running because my microphone, the red light is still on, so that generally is a good sign that there's power. So that's not too dissimilar for the two pieces. So let's work from this end again. So taking the clip out and getting ready with my hump jumper for when I turn the corner. So we have two straps. So when we put these down, we've already drawn on our dots and they go just between the dots. You can put a clip on just to hold it, and we're going to edge stitch it 1/8 of an inch down. So pretty much the same as you've top stitched. What's that side? And that will just hold it in place for the next stage, which will be starting to stitch everything together. So I will start further in and then reverse back, just to make sure that I don't knock it out of position with my sewing machine foot. Same again on the other side. So this will be hidden in the seam, you're not going to see this at all. So it's starting to look finished. There we go. So this is the bit where I do use plenty of clips. We're going to sandwich everything together and stitch around. We're going to leave a gap in the side for this piece and then a gap in the base for the other piece, just so that the two gaps are not in the same place, so we're not having to mess around with fabric trying to spring out or anything. So I think when I've done this previously, I have actually drawn on the seam allowance around the top just to make sure the curves are the same. But I haven't done it this time, so we'll see if I can actually manage it without having drawn everything on in advance. Here we go. Just going to put a couple more clips in and then 1/4 inch foot at the ready, and we are going to sew. So I'm going to stitch this time with the fluffy layer underneath, just because I find it easier, but I don't think it really matters. I'm going to leave a reasonably big turning gap in this one. So my stitching is on 3. I might, in fact I will turn it down a bit when I get to the top corners. What is interesting is that the layers are slightly trying to slide against each other. So I'm just going to use my fingers to hold them really nicely together. Actually, I've just thought normally I would definitely stitch from the other side because that is the front, so that's the bit you see. And you want to make sure that everything is even and neat. So I'm wondering if a Teflon foot would have actually been better. When I do the next one, I might well do it from the other side because this is really rippling and pushing. And I don't want it to do that. I know these pieces were exactly the same size at one point. Yeah, they are really trying to push against each other. Here we go. Let's pull it back in. So bearing in mind we want the other side to be perfect, I'm actually going to slightly fold that back so I can see At least going around this corner seems to be back to being nice and flat again. I wonder if a lot more clips would have dealt with that issue as well. So instead of taking the clips out now, because I'm worried that there is a little bit of an issue with the fabric sliding, I'm keeping the clips in to try and control it a bit more. And I'm going to just lift up the foot as much as I can. To try and release some of the pressure on the fabric. Obviously a walking foot is the other option here. If you had a walking foot, you probably wouldn't have these issues. Nearly there. Hooray. Sometimes you get to the point where you think, I really don't know if I want to see if I'm going to have to re-stitch this, but I'm hoping it's all going to be okay. So this side looks absolutely fine. There's a little bit of a twist, I can tell, just where the lining stretched out, but we're going to hope that's okay. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the seam allowance back of the batting, the curtain interlining I've used. So you can use an ordinary batting, but I've got used to using this over the years because it's got rows of stitching on it, which make it quite stable. It's sort of an acrylic viscose, so if you prefer to use natural fibres, then you could use the cotton instead. But this is quite good stuff to use and not too expensive either. Nearly there. Right, this side anyway. I have got some other scissors I use for doing this, which are like duck-billed applique scissors, which are great, but I left them on the cutting table on the other side of the room. That's interesting. It's a temporary glue I used, a basting glue, but some areas it seems to have stuck more than others, so there's quite a sticky bit here, which is a bit disgusting, but hey ho. Now when I've got something like this and I know it's going to turn back on the seam allowance, I actually slightly go in and then cut just inside where the seam allowance is, because we want to have a nice finish there. And we don't want the bulk of the interlining or batting or whatever we decide to use to give us sort of a bump. Because the whole point of the turning gaps is you want them to be invisible in the end. Yeah, this bit's just glued down really well as well. I wish there was a quicker way to do this. This can't be the most exciting thing to watch. Ooh. But it's one of those boring little jobs that if you forgot to do it, you would really see, because your seams would not look as nice. Same with using the notching or using the pinking shears. If you didn't do that, your finish just wouldn't be quite as professional. Oops. Nearly done anyway. It's like having sticky candy floss sticking to your fingers though, I would say, because I obviously used more glue in some areas than others. Hurrah! We are done. So before I do anything else, I'm quickly going to just check to make sure that these ends are around the same length. Yeah, which they are, so that's good. So let's get our pinking shears and quickly pink just the curves. Although I will go along the bottom as well of this. And then in a second I will also clip the corners. Clear this up, and like I said, let's just nip off that corner. And we're just going to try and make a nice edge for the turning gap. Doing it with my finger now this time because it's just as easy. And oh, this stuff's horrible to turn. Ugh. Really is. So what I might do actually, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to open out my turning gap a bit, because because I do not want to ruin this fabric. And obviously with cotton fabric, once you've turned through, it's a straightforward case of pressing again if it's wrinkly, but I don't know what we can do with this one. Whether I can give it a bit of a steam without melting it. Nearly there. I have used this fabric before. I think one of the versions I made of the wet and dry wash bag was in this canvas, but that was quite a while ago and I'd actually forgotten what it was like to work with. So the lesson is, when you're going to do something on camera, stitch a bit more first to practice. A bit like being on Bake Off. Right. And pick off the threads in a minute. Hopefully that's given us a bit more space to be able to make everything turn in. It's a lot easier when you turn through the back, purely because you've got the straps, so you can pull it all with the straps. I think we'll get it all the right way around and then I'll try and poke out all the bits. It looks all right now, where I've stitched it. Let's get my whole hand in there now. There we go. So it's just going to be the little horns that are going to be a bit of a pain. Definitely glad I had a bigger turning bit, that's much easier. Yay, one side is turned. See if I can force this other side to go. You know, once it's been top stitched, it will look absolutely fine. But yeah, we're getting there. I would say it's like giving birth, but it's not. But I know when you got a really big handbag or something you're turning through, it can take a lot of effort. So at least this isn't vinyl or something. Oh, I think I've still got an inch to go. We're nearly there. I can feel the ends right at the top there. You know, if I knew any jokes, this would be a good point to tell jokes, but no, I'm not a joke teller. I can tell you the weather's settled down a little bit out there though. The wind's dropped, although it's still slightly raining. Do you know, this is like putting the new duvet cover on that I put last night. Oh, we are so close now. The trouble is, if I leave too much in there, first of all, the ends won't be the same, and second of all, it will be a real lump. So when I start sewing, it might not like it very much. Oh, nearly there. Right, I think that's it. Oh, it hasn't creased much at all actually, which is great. So now I need to top stitch. Let's just check that the edges are still level. They are. Just going to give them one more go. One more go. Just feel like there's a tiny bit trapped in there. Ah. There it goes. Right. Okay. That was a bit of an ordeal. And now we are going to top stitch again. So where did I put that foot? I probably knocked everything on the floor. Right, there's my hump jumper. Let's use the other foot then. This is my old foot, so this one's not the one for the Janome, so I need to remember that the needle's slightly in a different place. We will definitely use the hump jumper at the beginning of this. And also, I'm going to turn it up to 3.5 because this is thick. Nope, still not going. Right, I'm actually going to use the thicker end of the hump jumper. Yay. Perfect. Yay, and now it's fine. The seam's right on the edge as it should be. So obviously if I'd used this different colour for the lining, you'd want that to be just slightly poking out a little bit at the edges, because then it's sort of like having a little bit of faux piping almost. Here we have the top stitching. It actually looks fine inside. It hasn't rippled or anything, which is what I was worried about. But now we can put that to one side, and we need to do the same again with this one. And what you need to remember to do with these is the straps need to be tucked inside, because what you don't want to do is stitch your straps to the outer. Of course, as I'm doing this, you can see I'm looking for my other foot because it can't have gone far, but it's a clear foot, so it's become invisible. Again, the other strap, just sort of tuck it inside. I'm not quite so worried about leaving such an enormous turning gap as I had to last time with this, purely because I've got the straps to pull on to let it out. So just grab my 1/4 inch foot, turn the seam allowance down a little, and I'm going to stitch this time with the white stuff up. Now there are a couple of points on this that you might have to use the hump jumper, because you've got the edge of this pocket here, and what you don't want it to do is actually send your seam off in the wrong direction. So you can just feel it there. I'm going to try and get a tiny bit closer, and then hump jumper in all the way up to where the ridge is. This is stitching absolutely fine now. Feel where the straps are inside and making sure I'm ending up at the other side of them. So what you can't see, but I can see, is I can actually see the edge of the green fabric, so I'm not following the edge of the white fabric at all, because that's a little bit stretchy and a bit of a pain. got another bit which I have got a bit of a ridge, so it's just whether I'll get around that, and I do, so I don't need the hump jumper for that one. We're nearly there. I wasn't sure how long this would take to sew, because every time I've sewed it, it's been, doing videos or tutorials or testing, or so this is the first time I've actually stitched in one sitting. But boring bit incoming again. So I'm just going to take out this interlining. Nearly there. Sticky again, like getting handfuls of candy floss. And what we'll do in a second, once I've done the zigzag pinking shears, I will literally reach up and grab the straps and we'll go from there, and you'll see how much easier it is. And there are some things that I do sew, like if I'm doing a sort of pieces, if I think I can get away with stitching a bit of ribbon to the end and turning it through that way, I do, just because we have to make our life easier where we can. But I always think when I'm watching something like Sewing Bee, how difficult it is for the contestants, because they don't get all of the little helpers, which I'm sure the judges know about, and I'm sure some of them probably do know about these little tips and tricks, because they're all really brilliant people who sew. But particularly when they make them sew rouleau loops and things, you think, oh, there's so many easier ways of doing that. Yes, I would definitely say it was easier stitching it from this side. It's a shame I haven't got a Teflon 1/4 inch foot, because that would be ideal. I think I could put some, you can put some very shiny sellotape or something on the bottom, which helps. But obviously, since I wasn't aware I was going to have a problem, I didn't prepare anything. I'm going great guns now. So I'm only going to pinking shear. I'm going to pinking shear the top curve and the bottom curves. Oops. I'm obviously also going to fold back and finger press the gap at the bottom there. So if it drops out for any reason, I do apologise, and I will come on and do a short video just to show you the finished article when we're there, as we are very near to finishing. Okay, so pinking shears. Obviously I'm not going to clip into the straps at all, because they need to be resilient. You don't want those fraying. because they're going to take all of the weight of the items that you put in this. Oops. So I'd have a quick check to make sure I hadn't put the foot in the thread basket, but I can't see it, so right, I'm just going to cut that. I'm also going to grade the seams a little bit by making the ones at the back shorter. Just a little bit less bulk for when we top stitch along there. Okay, I think we are ready to pull through. Oh no, still not quite, still got to do this. Okay, and up inside, let's grab that strap. Pull it through. I'm also going to grab the second strap. If I can find it. Yeah, there it is. It always looks so sad and bedraggled when you're in the process of pulling through, doesn't it? But we are so close. So close. Which is good, because normally I would have got up and stopped and walked around a bit by now. And of course, when you're watching this video later, you can just pause it and go off and make a cup of tea or something. This has come out all right. No need for the point turner because everything pulled out with the straps. I'm just going to put a little clip in the bottom to hold it closed. But when we go to put the two parts together, we'll have a look at it and see if we need to fiddle with the edges there. But last but not least, let's get this curve out. Yeah, that's going to be absolutely fine. So, switch to the other foot. Not the correct one though. Probably on the floor. Right, I can definitely feel the need for the hump jumper going around to start. So I'm actually going to put it all the way onto the biggest one, which I don't normally do. And back up to 3.5. Again, you can see what you're doing, but you can also feel, and you know when things aren't sitting quite right. So that's when you can stop and just have a little fiddle before you go back round again. Jumper time again. Clip off the little ends. So we are very nearly there. That's the back. That's the front. It looks horrible and ridgy when you see it like this. It doesn't look even because obviously that final row of top stitching is going to be what makes it look perfect. So I'm just going to put a couple of clips to hold this turning gap closed. Oops. Thought I'd drop it as well then just to see what happens. I'm seeing my dad next Tuesday, so I shall give it to him then. Let's see if I can get him to pose for photographs. Depends what he's wearing, probably. If he's gardening, he might not be wearing something he wants to get photographed in. Okie dokie. So, what we're going to do then is we're going to start on the bottom and make sure it is even. And I'm going to start clipping. Now, annoyingly, if you stitch it round in one go, you will end up with one end longer than the other. It's just one of those things. So we're going to have to stitch it the easy way for the first side and then the hard way for the second side. I have tried it both ways and this is how it works. So what you do when you come to these edges, they look like they're a completely different shape, but if you actually pick up the fabric and move them with your fingers so that they are definitely both joined together, and that starts the little bit where it rises and has the extra extra lift in the front pocket. A little thread there. Obviously if you can snip any threads before you stitch them, then it's much easier to pull them out. Now hopefully when we get to the other side we'll be able to make the pocket go to the same height as this one is here, but at the same time once you put this down and stitched around here, it can actually sort of disguise any little gaps that you've got. Let's see, in fact what we could do is start with that as our target and then clip downwards because everything's got a little tiny bit of stretch in it. So we're about 1 1/4 from the top. So 1 1/4. Let's get a clip and clip them in there. I mean, who knows where it will end up by the time it's stretched a bit as we're stitching, but you never know just how much it's going to stretch or not. So again, I'm lifting the curve at the bottom there to match the curve on the other side. So if you get the edges as level as possible, you know that when you're stitching, you are actually going to go through all of the layers. Righty ho, let's do this. With the wrong foot, unfortunately, but there's not much we can do about that. So I'm going to start just about in the middle. I'm actually only going to put my hump jumper into one side. I'm not actually going to put it on all the way down, all the way through. I'm going to have to remember with this foot, because this isn't a Janome foot and the needle is slightly offset on a Janome, then I'm going to have to position the foot a little bit more carefully coming round, because otherwise the stitching won't be in the same place. So this is actually shifted very slightly as I'm sewing. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to shift up to where it is the same. Then as I come around the corner, I'm going to get my hand inside and, ooh, I don't need to get my hand inside, I'm going to lift that slightly. And I'm going to keep moving it around and keeping it in exactly the same line. So this is why I said sometimes it stretches a little as you're stitching it. There we go. It's looking decent though. So I'm going to take out these other clips because I can see it has stretched. So I might as well just okay, first side done. Looks all right. So now, this is where you have to roll it up to fit it inside. It becomes easier once you've gone around that corner. So I can see I need to have the foot in a slightly different position for this. Oh, it has unthreaded itself. Luckily, I noticed in time. Let's pause and rethread because I couldn't see the thread at all. There we go. Needle back in the right position. Let's start again. this is the danger when you come around this curve. If it started to push, the layers are pushing against each other and stretching. And obviously if you're using a walking foot, you probably won't have any of these issues. I'm just resistant to using a walking foot because I really don't like it. One day I will have a machine with inbuilt walking foot. I'll be so happy. Oops. Right, it looks like they're still level on top of each other. There's definitely a bit of a ripple forming, so let's take the clips out, and not all of them this time because we've got the turning gap that I want to keep under control. There we go. I have the little threads at the end here. We are nearly done. Hooray! So just the straps to stitch on. Oh, hooray! Right, clip the ends. I will show you. There we go. So let's more ends to snip. So if you have any clippings, if you're cutting things, you can pop them in this part of the pocket. So if you, like me, and you tend to have your phone with you everywhere you can go, you can pop that in there or have something else in there. And do you know what? Those ends both grew by about the same amount. So what we're going to do now is very quickly stitch these down here, and then we are done. So I'm just going to use my chalk, or will I? Yeah, I can see my chalk pencil. I'm just going to use the chalk to do a line. And then we are going to sew around in a box. So what I will do to hold everything tight is pop a clip in that side. And I've got to keep remembering this is not the same foot, so I need to be a bit further along than I thought. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so if you want to just slightly drop your needle to see if it's going to hit the right place, we're going to sew the box within the top stitching we did earlier. Ooh. It did not like that. Let's lift the needle. Oh, it was stuck. Let's get the hump jumper just here. Hopefully it won't do that the next time, but I mean there are a lot of layers. That's fine. A little moment of madness there. It was trying to tell me that I don't normally stitch for this long in a row. In one go, I normally stop and move around. There's the hump jumper. Probably won't need it going down, but I will do on the way back. Again, I'm going to use the fat end, which I don't normally, but I don't think we need it on this side because the actual top of the front pocket is doing the job for us. Okay. So that's one. Let's do the other side. Jumper. I don't want to take any risks because that was a very strange noise that the machine made. There we have it. And let's just take off those threads. It needs a good, I don't know, hairdryer, light steam, something, or maybe just stuffing with some tissue to get rid of any creases. But after that, it will go to my dad, and I think he'll be quite pleased with it. We have it. Ooh, one more thread. I can't let it go without the red coming off. That's it then. So, scissors in there, bits and pieces in the front. You can put clips in that pocket or whatever you think you're going to use for sewing, and then see for your gardening gear. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I hope that it was interesting, and I hope you can see how easy this pattern is, and I look forward to joining you at another time. Okay, thanks for watching. Oh, this is the point where I have to stand up and turn the camera off. Okay, bye.